So, but I wanted to know, see, a lot of your work when I go through your lectures and your work and what I can gather from it, you've done a lot of work on particle physics.
That's right.
It's one of the most complicated sort of, it's not easy for a common man to understand. So please tell us about this interest in particle physics. What is particle physics in such a way so that a common man can understand, because you're also a great scientific communicator.
Well,
So
let's hope so.
no, I've heard your lectures. So
No,
what is
let's
particle
hope I can tell you. No, I mean, because this is my love. I mean, particle physics is my love. So I should be able to share that excitement without going. See, one thing is that, okay, as a subject, it is perhaps very complex. It's complex because it's not, the concepts are not complex. So that is something I can tell very easily. So, very simply put, and this is about as simply as I can say it, is that particle physics is really the story of the bricks and the mortar that with which our, the sculpture of our universe is built. Okay, now there cannot be anything simpler than that. So
so
more technically, what, the basic fact, I mean, beginning from Democritus or beginning from our old Indian sages who talked about Panchamahabhutas, or the Greeks who talked about earth element, water, fire, and wind as elements.
elements,
The
yes.
idea was that we thought these were the elements, right? But then came Democritus, then came Kanant, who kind of postulated that maybe, the everything is made up of some fundamental unit, and they called it Anu.
Mhm.
Kanat called it Anu, Democritus called it atom. And everything is made up of some fundamental unit. So it's like Lego. What is the building block of a Lego building block?
Right.
And with that one piece, you cannot make a big picture, big Lego figure out of one piece. But there are 2, 3 different pieces, they have to fit into each other, and then you can build a big building, you can build a car, or you can build a destroyer, or whatever you want to play with it, right? There are big
Right.
Lego sculptures you can build. But
Right.
what you need is to know what are the basic pieces, 4 pieces, 5 pieces. And there are only basic 4, 5 Lego pieces. You put them together and you make bigger and bigger and bigger. This is like puzzle, right? So particle physics is actually the subject which looks at a big Lego figure or looks at a puzzle and tries to guess what are the basic blocks, Lego blocks.
I see.
Now, that is not very complicated, right?
But so as you said, there are 4 or 5 kinds of Lego pieces only. So in
Correct.
particle physics, what are the basic kinds of
Yes.
Lego pieces
That
we
is
have?
what I'm going to come next.
Okay.
So, in particle physics, over last 100 years, and more or less, I would say the story began in 1897 when Thomson discovered electron.
Okay.
How did he discover electron? That was actually a very interesting and very simple experiment. It's the same thing that shows us our TV today. So the mechanism, it was just a cathode ray tube. You had a element here, a filament. It was heated. Then some guys came out of that filament, and they were called cathode rays, and they would hit it. Now that's what they hit when they hit our, not anymore, these are no more, we have now LED and LCD screens, but the old fashioned television worked just on
Right.
that. So that's all the equipment that Thomson needed to figure out that apart from the hydrogen, because hydrogen atom by that time had been known, people had realized, Dalton had already told us that there is hydrogen, there is oxygen, there is carbon. This was known. Atoms, they were known as atoms and molecules,
Yes.
not the nuclei. So what Thomson found for the first time in this simple experiment, that this filament emits particles which have the same charge as that of the hydrogen ion, because that Faraday could measure, but it had a mass which was about 2000 times smaller than the mass of the hydrogen ion. So this was a completely new thing. So this was the beginning. And
Right.
now we know there are two different distinct kinds of fundamental building blocks. One are called, the name, this is just a name, you can give them any other name, we call them leptons. And the lepton is supposed to mean light. Lep in Greek is light. So lepton means small mass. So, and electron is one of the leptons.
Right. So things which have less mass is a lepton.
Are leptons. At least this is how it began. See,
Okay.
that is the whole problem. Now, if I give you the full list, you will find that not all the leptons have small mass. But now what we know is that there are these objects which are like electron, but heavier than the electron also. Otherwise, they are just like an electron in terms of its electromagnetic charge, in terms of how they move in a magnetic field. All those properties are exactly the same. And there are three such objects called electron, muon, and the tau lepton.
Okay.
And their masses are very different. Electron mass, the muon mass is about 200 times the electron mass, and the tau lepton mass is about 20,000 times the mass of the electron.
Okay.
That's why I said that though it is called lepton, now it's called lepton for a different reason. So these three leptons, this is one set of fundamental building blocks. Then we all have heard about the neutrinos which come from the sun, which are emitted in beta decay. So each of these leptons have their cousin, have their brother neutrino. So there is an electron type neutrino, muon type neutrino, and a tau neutrino. So these are 6 building blocks.
Okay.
Then there are another building blocks, because right now only I have told you, see, what is the fundamental matter we know? Hydrogen atom, I already began with. What is hydrogen atom is made up of? It's a proton at the center. This we all have learned now. And there is an electron going around. So I have only talked about the electron that goes around.
Correct.
Now what about the proton? Is that elementary? That is not elementary. This is what we learned in last 100 years.
Okay.
And what we learned is that inside the nucleus is made up of protons and neutrons.
Correct.
But the protons and neutrons are made up of some more fundamental objects. And these objects, we call them quarks for anything better, any better name. This was actually a name, strange name given to them by people who discovered quarks, and that was Gell-Mann. So he was a great reader, and this was a poem in some famous poem. There were the 3 quarks for Mr. Mark. Some such poetry was there, and he said, okay, this sounds like a good name. So they are now, that name has stuck. So there are, for example, a proton is made up of 2 up type of quarks and 1 down type of quarks.
So that's a plus charge.
Now they differ from each other in charge.
Okay.
Otherwise, there would be no difference between them, but they differ from each other with their electromagnetic charge, such that the 2 up quarks plus 1 down quark makes 1 proton.
Right.
And the proton charge is exactly that of an electron charge.
Correct.
So the up type quark and a down type quark actually don't have they have to have fractional charges, because 2 of these and 1 of that has to make 1. So now, therefore, right now you have fundamental building blocks which are electron, muon, and the tau, the 3 types of neutrinos, and then these quarks. So to explain the matter that is around us, all we need is up quark, down quark, and an electron.
But how do you add 3 up quark or down quarks to make a neutron?
2 down quarks and 1 up quark makes a neutron.
Oh, so the up quark is plus 2 by 3.
Exactly. Like exactly. So 2 up quarks is plus 2 by 3, down quark is minus 1 by 3.
Okay.
So 2 up quarks will give 4/3 minus 1/3 gives me proton. But
Correct.
2 down quarks and 1 up quark which give me 0. So that's
Zero.
neutron. So to
Right.
explain the world around us, all we need is up quark, down quark, and electron.
I see.
And the neutrino which gets emitted in beta decay and comes from the sun to us.
So that's your Lego kit. With that you
That's
can
all
make
we
anything.
will need to explain everything around us. But the beauty of particle physics is, and that is where it begins, is that I told you already about muon and the tau, which are heavy brothers of electron. So are there
Leptons.
heavy brothers of the up quark and the down quark? Indeed, it turns out there are heavy brothers of up quark and the down quark.
Okay.
But there are 3 such brothers or sisters, whatever you want to call them, siblings.
Right.
So we have 3 types of leptons,
Mhm.
3 types of neutrinos,
Right.
then 6 types of quarks.
6 types of quarks. Okay, I just read 2.
Up, down, repeated 3 times.
Okay.
And we have given them different nice names. One is called charm, one is called beauty, one is called top, one is called strange.
Strange.
There are reasons for that, but we don't have that much time to explain why they were called like this. But the important point there is now is that, but in what sense do they exist? Because I just told you that for the world around us, we just need up, down, and electron and a neutrino.
Hmm.
So, in what sense all these other things existent? They get created in high energy processes. They were created in the early universe,
Big Bang time.
in the Big Bang time, and now they get created routinely when we do our high energy scattering experiments. When we take high energy protons and hit them on each other, or we take high energy electrons and hit them on high energy electrons, these guys get created if the energy is enough.
And do they live for long enough or do they just die?
No, that is the second part. They don't live. They promptly decay. It's like water is kept at a very high level, and if you make a hole, it will fall down completely. The water will come down, no?
Right.
It will not want to stay at high level. So it is something like this. These guys have too much energy. So they cannot stay together. They explode. They break down.
Okay.
So, but they live in that high energy environment for some short time.
Okay.
And all the experiments of last 3 decades, I would say even 4-5 decades, that were done using cosmic rays first. That was, India was very big in cosmic ray experiments. Actually, that was when, Sarabhai used to do cosmic ray experiments. So did Professor Bhabha, and many eminent Indian scholars did cosmic ray physics. So some of the early particles were found in these cosmic ray experiments. So this is how these particles are found. So now, as I told you, the easiest thing is they are Lego pieces. I've given you the names of those Lego pieces. Now we have measured them in the laboratory. We know that there are reasons why we give them those names and group them in that way, because of their charges, which we measure, the masses, which you measure. But that's a matter of detail, and that's not, conceptually it is no different. So these are the fundamental building blocks of nature. And particle physics is nothing but that is the last line I want to add.
Sure.
How these things are put together to make your proton. How the protons and neutrons are put together to make your nucleus. Understanding this, what interactions do this for you? What forces do this for you? And now what is wonderful in the last 100 years we have understood is that there are only these fundamental Lego blocks, there are special connectors to connect these Lego blocks with each other, and there exists only a finite number of elementary such connectors, and we call them force carriers.
Bosons, are they similar?
They are all bosons.
Great.
So now you see, this is the story. I have quarks, I have leptons, and these are all what are called, since you use the they are all spin half particles in units of h cross.
Spin half, like half.
Spin half. In units, that means half h cross. H cross is the fundamental constant, which we can, some number. Right now we will forget. But in that unit, it has a spin which is unit half. And a boson, which carry forces, has in the same units spin 1. Okay. So matter is spin 0, spin half. Force is spin 1. And then comes this completely unintuitive guy called the Higgs boson, which is a boson but which has a spin 0. So whenever the spin is integral, we call them bosons. Whenever the spin is half, we call them fermions.
Fermions.
Okay. So matter is always fermions.
Okay.
And what is the difference between fermions and bosons? That's a very easy one to understand. Fermions don't like to stick together. They hate each other. So in a given energy, one point in space, you cannot put two fermions with the same energy level. Okay. But bosons, you can put as many as you wish, and they will all, this is like our Indian trains, you'll all put them together, they will all clutter together and cluster together. So
and bosons do they have mass? Bosons have mass?
They have all masses. All the bosons have masses. Not all, okay, some of them have 0 mass, but that's a mass. All of them have masses, except that some of the mass value for some of them is 0. Okay. Because the mass value of these bosons actually decides what is the range of the force that they can exert or they can carry. See, it's like this. When you exchange force, see, if right now we are not in the same room, but if we were in the same room and if I threw a piece of chalk at you, I would attract your attention, right? So that piece of chalk would be the carrier of my force that I'm exerting on your head if I threw the chalk at you. Now, if the piece of chalk is smaller, I can throw it further away with the same energy. So therefore, the smaller the mass of the boson, the further the range of the force.
Okay.
It's so which
is the highest range force then?
That's the electromagnetic force. Okay. Coulomb force, which we all study. Electromagnetism, we study in schools.
So the electromagnetic, the W carrier, what do you call the...
W carries a force, that's a weak force. Okay. And that W is a very heavy guy. So that acts only within a nucleus. That force acts only within a nucleus. And that's why it is the W that causes the nucleus to disintegrate. Becquerel found that nuclei disintegrate. That's why Becquerel got his Nobel Prize in 1890, got the Nobel Prize in 1900 odd, but he made the discovery in 1896. So nuclei disintegrate because of the force of the weak bosons.
Okay. And which is the lightest boson?
The photon is mass 0. And so is gluon, by the way, which carries the strong interaction. But there are other reasons why the gluon range is small. But that is a much more complicated concept. And it took particle physicists about, I would say, 65 years to understand it. So we will leave that. That's why Gross and Wilczek and Politzer got their Nobel Prize. So we will leave that out. It's sort of a slightly different concept that I would have to bring in, and I'm not sure we need it for this discussion further. But therefore, the story is very simple. Since you brought in all the words, it makes my life easy. Matter, that is matter is made up of. Matter objects, fundamental constituents of matter, what I call matter, are all fermions. They are either leptons or quarks. The 2 quarks, up quarks and 1 down quark would make a proton. 2 up down quarks and 1 up quark will make a neutron. Protons and neutrons will make a nucleus. A nucleus, say, with 6 protons and 6 neutrons and 6 electrons, this will be a carbon nucleus, C12, for example. And then C, carbon and hydrogen make hydrocarbons
Petrol.
and petrol, but they also more important than that. The OH and the CH bonds actually make DNA, life. So this is it. That's life. So
we are all
life is made up of these. We are all made up of these things at the end of it. But there are more. There are more fundamental objects in universe. And those fundamental objects, though they are not in our universe as we live today, they were there in the beginning, and they still get created when we do create a high energy environment. But what is beautiful about particle physics is that now we are able to say that there exists only these and alone fundamental particles in the universe. These ones.
And is there another theory which you worked is on the theory of supersymmetry? So
you are really taking the words out of my mouth. Great, thank you.
So all of these particles, do they have what do you call a cousin particle or something?
No, that's a very good question. Because I was about, when I made this statement that these are the only particles, I was going to tell you that, however, there is a small exception to it, and I was going to go into supersymmetry. So you asked me exactly this question. But so let me say this: what we call standard model.
Right.
Okay. What I have told you so far is the standard model. So there are quarks, there are leptons, there are gauge bosons, which are photons, gluons, W and the Z, and then there is the Higgs boson. And the Higgs boson, which is a different beast, which has a spin 0, and in some sense there is no force associated with it, but it is very important for the universe, the way it behaves, for our understanding, the mathematical understanding that it's correct. To make sure that that is correct, we needed to find the Higgs boson. So this makes the standard model. What our mathematics tells us is that in the standard model, this is all the particles that can be. All right. Now the question, and the funny part, not funny, the important part is almost all the experiments we have done so far, the results we have been able to explain all the observed results in terms of these particles. So then do we say that the world of particle physics is closed, we understand everything, close the shop and start doing something else? No, right? And that is where the question you asked comes into picture. Is while we have understood a lot of things about the world around us, how nuclei decay, how a mu meson decays, why does it decay precisely in the time with the lifetime that it has, why do different nuclear reactions happen exactly at the rate they happen, we have been able to understand all that in terms of this basic physics. We have even been able to understand in principle, the one important fact that the universe seems to be consisting only of matter. We don't have antimatter anywhere in our vicinity. If we had antimatter, it would have started annihilating. So we don't do that. That means that the universe actually is dominated by matter. But that's very confusing because the laws of physics that we have derived in particle physics do not distinguish between matter and antimatter. But something happened. So in the beginning, matter and antimatter was in equal proportion, but in the universe as it exists today, matter dominates. And why does that happen? So let me first say this, that it all sounds very esoteric when I start talking about particle physics, right? And then you say, okay, so you understood how everything is put together, but maybe 1,000, 10,000 particle physicists should be interested in it. Why should I be interested in it? A man on the street. A man on the street has to be interested in it because the same physics that we study in these big high energy experiments the same laws of physics seem to be working in the beginning of the universe and also seem to be working today at the edges of galaxies, centers of galaxies. And we need this knowledge of these laws to understand those things. This knowledge is important because it helps us understand how from the early universe in the Big Bang, protons and neutrons got formed. From the sheer energy that was there originally. How did the nuclei get formed? Of course, we need some astrophysics knowledge for that, but you need the fundamental knowledge of the forces among fundamental particles to understand these things in a scientific manner. Which means that the laws of particle physics are not just for those few of us who want to know what happens inside a nucleus or inside when I take 10 millions of protons and bang them against each other. It's not only an academic question. It's a question of importance because that helps me understand universe, things about universe in terms of these laws that we are studying inside the nucleus. I mean, that to me, that was actually the first realization that particle physics grapples with the fundamentals of the universe.
Right.
But if that happens, then I should be able to understand everything about the universe, starting from these laws.
Right.
Now, that is not yet completely done.
Okay.
And what are the things that we still cannot explain? Okay.
Right.
One of them is why universe is dominated by matter.
Okay.
Funnily enough, our particle physics theories give a logical process by which matter will start dominating. But if we try to compute exactly by how much it should dominate, my computations go wrong. That means that qualitatively, laws of particle physics explain to us why matter dominates over antimatter. But quantitatively, the exact amount of dominance, we are not able to compute from first principles yet.
Okay.
So, the aim of a real theoretical physicist would be that I want to compute it from first principles and obtain the answer that we experimentally measure. Isn't it?
Of course. Right.
This is one big thing that we are not able to get answer. Second thing that we are not able to answer is the dark matter in the universe.
Okay.
Universe seems to have a lot of matter which doesn't shine. Only evidence for this matter is because of the gravitational force it exerts. For example, galaxies, when they rotate around the center, the rotational speed of the galaxies, you would imagine that as you go away and away from the center of the galaxy, the rotation speed should decrease, but it doesn't. And that tells you that there is matter that you cannot see, but which this rotating matter sees.
Right.
How can that be? Rotating matter sees it through gravitation. So this is called the dark matter problem. We don't yet have a solution to the dark matter. Just yesterday, there is a very nice result that has been announced in the US of the measurement of the magnetic moment of the muon. See, muon is like electron's cousin, I told you, heavier cousin. It has a fixed charge and it has a magnetic moment. And by making a very accurate prediction of this magnetic moment in our theory, in the standard model, we have been able to convince ourselves that the prediction and the measurement differ from each other, by the way, in the 12th decimal place.
Oh, okay.
But they differ from each other. And now, since my calculation is accurate to the 13th decimal place, and the measurement is also accurate to 13th decimal place, if they differ in the 12th decimal place, that means there is some other contribution outside the standard model that exists, and we have perhaps seen it. This is just guessing. Perhaps we have seen a number which does not agree with standard model prediction. Because since I trust my prediction to 13th decimal place, and if it differs from the measured value in the 12th decimal place, that means whatever I have computed, which is correct, over and above something else exists. And that contribution must come from something that is outside the standard model, outside the particles that I have told you so far.
Right.
So this is to us, seems to be these 3-4 indications that there exist particles or interactions that are not in the standard model.
Correct. And this is where
that is where supersymmetry comes into picture. Supersymmetry is one of the, we have particle physicists have been thinking about these ideas. Is there something beyond standard model for last 30 odd years? Because particle physicists were quite convinced almost 30 years ago that this is really the right story, and more data got collected. And finally, 10 years ago, we found the Higgs boson, which proved that the theory is really, really correct. Now, these small differences and also these other qualitative problems, such as dark matter, such as matter, antimatter, dominance of matter, or the G- measurement of the magnetic moment of the muon, is beginning to tell us that there is some physics beyond the standard. And one of the most attractive ideas which theorists have thought about to go beyond standard model is called supersymmetry. And now, beyond standard model can either mean new interactions or new particles, or both. There are theoretical motivations to consider different extensions. In supersymmetry is one of the extensions which I happen to like most, and I think many theorists still like it very much, because it's a culmination of the theoretical ideas about particle physics, which I have not told you anything about, which have developed based on concepts of symmetries. That is, theoretically, some theories have some nice properties, and we call them that they have symmetries. Okay? Right. These nice properties, we decide, we choose to call them symmetries. Okay. So what we have learned is that these symmetries have actually been responsible why these physical theories have been able to explain all the observations so well. So there is something deep and fundamental about these symmetries of nature, as it were. And supersymmetry is the sort of the ultimate extension of these ideas. And in these ideas, you don't add any additional interactions, but the symmetry tells you that for every standard model particle, you will have a supersymmetric cousin.
Only
supersymmetric extent. So for an electron, there will be a supersymmetric electron.
Okay. And they'll be similar?
They will be in the limit, they will be exactly the same, but of course we have to accept the spin will be different. So the spin makes the difference, and the supersymmetric partners will have a spin differing by half a unit. So the supersymmetric of the electron partner of the electron is a spin 0 object, and supersymmetric partner of a photon is a spin half object. Supersymmetric partner of a up quark is a spin 0 object, which we call supersymmetric U quark, and so on and so forth. So supersymmetry is an extension of the standard model, where we keep the interactions to be the same, but particle spectrum is doubled. Number of fundamental particles are doubled.
Okay.
Because you see, I told you in the beginning that particle physics has fundamental particles and fundamental forces. Now, supersymmetry keeps the forces the same,
okay,
except doubles the particles. Associated with every spin half particle, it associates 2 spin 0 particles. Associated with every spin 1 particle, it associates 1 spin half particle.
So all the bosons will become spin half.
Fermions, exactly. All the spin 1 bosons their counterpart, supersymmetric counterpart, will be spin half fermion, and all the fermions, their supersymmetric counterpart will be boson. So supersymmetry takes a fermion into a boson. That is actually supersymmetry.
Interesting.
Supersymmetry acts on this quantity called spin, which we don't even understand very easily now, but it is this, it operates on this quantity. And why this is an important symmetry? It is an important symmetry because particle physicists had thought of it long time before, because even before the Higgs boson was found, theoretically, we see, one of the things that you asked me already this question, so I can build on that, is that explaining the masses of the fundamental particles is not so easy. The charges one can explain, but the masses one can't easily. And that is where the quote unquote the problem is, that to understand why the photon is massless and the W and Z have large mass, the question you had asked me, to understand that we have to introduce the Higgs boson. Higgs boson has to exist to explain simultaneously why the photon is massless and the W and Z are heavy.
Right.
Okay, this was the question you had asked me. What is the lightest and what is the heaviest?
Right.
Now, therefore, we are able to explain why the W boson and the Z boson have the mass it has, why the photon has the mass it has. But that entire theory doesn't tell me why the Higgs boson has the mass it has. And we expect that the Higgs boson mass is allowed to be as large, theoretically, to be as large as it can be. But experimentally, we find that it is not very large. It is the same mass as the W, very close to the mass of the W and the Z. So what keeps this balloon of the Higgs mass tethered to the ground rather than going to the sky? Theoretically, it can just go up in the sky, and the mass in the sky is the limit for its mass, theoretically. But experimentally, and now we have found that it has a very acceptable mass, just the similar mass to W and the Z.
Right.
For the W and the Z, I have a theoretical reason why the mass is what it is. For the Higgs, I don't have that theoretical reason. And
So
supersymmetry provides me that theoretical reason.
Right. Okay.
So supersymmetry actually is an idea which explains the same way Higgs boson was the idea which says what keeps the masses of the W and the Z pinned to the values that they have. Higgs boson is the reason. And now supersymmetry is the reason why the Higgs boson mass stays pinned to the ground like this. It's a theoretical, it's really a conceptual thing. And I don't have proof for that. And the only proof will be if we find supersymmetric particles.
Correct.
And so far, Large Hadron Collider has looked for it, hasn't found it. But I think many of us still haven't given up. Because we cannot predict the masses of the supersymmetric particles.
Correct.
See, masses are the most complicated things to understand theoretically. From pure theory, those are the most difficult things. So it's always masses. Why does W and the Z have the mass they have? Now we are asking the question, why does the Higgs boson have the mass it has?
Yeah, everything is around the mass, it seems.
The mass problem. As a matter of fact, there is another important problem, which is why the proton has exactly the mass it has. Because all these ideas don't explain the proton mass. So that there is actually an institute called Clay Institute, which has set up these, I forget, they have given a $10 million award for each $1 million or $1 million or $10 million award for solving these problems. And this Clay Institute has 8 problems. And one of the problem is mass of the proton. Because that is something decided by the properties of the strong interactions, which hold protons, quarks inside a proton. And we don't understand completely those interactions in certain kinematic regime. And that is required to understand the mass of the proton. So mass problems are the ones that are driving that have been driving the progress of physics. What is the dark mass, right? Dark matter. How is the missing mass in the universe made up of? That's one.
Antimatter.
Antimatter. Where is the antimatter gone? It's again a problem of mass.
And exotic matter.
So these are the problems in particle physics right now. And what is now interesting is that you are beginning to explore these ideas not just in these colliders, but also in the universe, also in the galaxies. So this is called astroparticle physics.
Okay.
Now particle physicists are using astrophysics as well as the laboratories on the ground as their laboratories to test their theories.
Amazing. Great.
That's where it is. It's absolutely going strong, and I think the path is.
Yes, I think that's how we unravel the mysteries of the universe, and in that process we get to know ourselves, because we are the universe in many ways. We are a part of it, and the universe is in us. So there
is a very interesting statement that Einstein had made once. He said that it is incomprehensible to him that the universe is comprehensible to human intellect at all.
But that sounds pessimistic.
No. As a matter of fact, I think it's a matter of wonder. That what he's really trying to say is that this human mind has been able to comprehend all this.
Okay.
It's a wonder. It's a wonder.
Okay. So it's a good thing.
This is the wonder we need to celebrate.
Absolutely. No, I think our understanding goes so far beyond our existence as a living being, even as a species, and even as life itself. If we can understand
that is why I'm saying that is what he was expressing, that it's a wonderment that is being expressed. And just now I told you, this is how I make carbon, this is how I make hydrogen, this is how I make OH, and this is how I make DNA, and this is how I make life. And that the humankind has been able to unravel all this at all. To me, that's an amazing feat as an intellectual feat. But at the same time, you see, let us not think that this is all that these experiments did. Today, the high energy physics experiments that we did, in fact, helped us invent internet. And if the internet didn't exist, I have no idea how we would have dealt with COVID.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
I have no idea how the world would have functioned without internet. So you see, internet was developed by particle physicists to analyze their data. But they changed the way we live. It changed the way we live. It changed the way we do our finance. It's changed the way we communicate. It's changed the way we store information, changed the way we exchange information. And it changed the way we are moving on in technology also.
Absolutely.
So,
great.
To me, science, this actually tells us that it's all, all these different strands.
Intertwined.
They are all intertwined. And that's the beauty.
Yes,
that's the beauty of life. The unity of all this somehow is something which is very amazing.
No, absolutely. Particle physics and medical sciences have so many confluences. So many years of life has been added to us because we are able to do so much of particle physics on our own body. Yeah. So I'm sure as we go ahead, anybody who wishes to do a career on either astroparticles or particle physics and supersymmetry, they would find a lot of coherence and inspiration from you. I wanted to have an advice from you, from somebody, say a girl or even a boy, who wants to pursue a career in pure sciences. Because in India, sometimes we are too much driven into technology. Everybody wants to do a B or a BTech, but pure sciences, relatively lesser number of people. If somebody wants to do that, what is your advice for that person?
Okay. I'm glad you asked me that question. That is part of the reason why I added this information about internet.
Yes.
There is no such, according to me, there is no such thing as pure research and applied research. That is what I meant by this unity. Okay. So, but the whole point is that you want to answer questions about why of the things. And that somewhere gives you the tools to better your lives. That gives you access to better technology. But somehow you need to be true to the questions you ask. You should not be asking, I want to build the best possible laser. That is not the way to go. The way to go, and how it has happened, is that I just want to understand how light interacts when I make it very intense. And then suddenly you find, oh my God, lasers are there. So people who found lasers were just studying light. So what is important is to go to the basics and understand how things work, how nature works, more than things, how nature works. And it's always rewarded. Whether or not, there's a very interesting story I can tell you here. Long back, I think it was either Faraday or maybe Maxwell, I forget, Faraday most likely. So when, this must be Faraday. So when he was explaining to them this entire Maxwell's equations, so he was explaining to somebody, talking at some meeting, and then the Exchequer of England asked him, so what good is it? So he said, I dare say, sir, someday you will tax it. So the transfer from a time when a fundamental work and a discovery gets translated into a technological or engineering application, the times difference between them can be varying. Sometimes it can be very quick, sometimes it can be very long. But the important thing is first to concentrate on the nature of things, on the science, basic things, working of science. And that always helps you in understanding and developing, innovating in technology.
Great. So curiosity of the fundamentals.
That is it. That is all. That's what I said. That you must understand how things work, how nature works. That is the most important thing. What in particular thing in nature interests you? I mean, sometimes somebody might be interested in why this particular type of bird is not found in this part of Bangalore, and why this bird is found in south of Bangalore. Even that may be a curiosity. And even that curiosity might have a important reason.
Yes, the butterfly effect of curiosity can lead to something.
And where it will take us, we don't know. But that is the most important thing in life, in science. That's how I see it.
And I think if I could gather from your own experiences, courage is also very important. I think courage played a huge role in your life.
If you're saying that, I think another one thing which gets forgotten quite often, hard work is quite important. Apples don't fall on head. Hard work is quite important. You have to be ready to bend your back and work hard. The curiosity gives you the rise to interesting questions. The courage kind of, when you judge whether you have the ability to answer that question, or judge what is the thing that you need, information, experiments, mathematics, to answer that question. That comes from training, that comes from learning, that comes from peers, that comes from teachers. But after that happens, working hard is equally important part of doing science.
Correct. Great. So
that is not to be looked down upon as drudgery, not drudgery. So I agree with you. Curiosity, courage,
and hard work.
Training and hard work.
Curiosity, courage, training, and hard work.
You need advice. You don't. You need to stand on the giants of the shoulders of the giant. You need to build upon things that exist. You need to understand the knowledge that exists, and you need to innovate.
Absolutely.
So therefore, I think now we have got good words: curiosity, courage, knowledge
building, and
hard work.
hard work.
This is required. I think between you and me, we have come up with nice.
Great. So that'll be like Professor Rohini's 4 ways of success. 4 paths of success. Great. Okay, Rohini ji, absolutely thrilled. You are Padma Shri. So my respect to you and thank you for joining us and your time. Absolutely thrilled. You have that charm of a beautiful teacher.
Thank you.
That I can sense in you. So it is just thrilling. It doesn't get boring. It doesn't get elongated. It just has that. It's very. The way you put it, I don't have the right words, but it's very. It doesn't sound like just a professor. It sounds like I'm talking to a teacher. There's a difference between the two.
I'm glad you felt that way.